Hi, this is Dr. Kimberley Linert, author of Visualizing Happiness in Every Area of Your Life and host of this podcast, Incredible Life Creator. And my guest today is Miss Jessica Smith Dos Santos. Now, Jessica Smith Dos Santos is a retired RN of 17 years turned full-time health coach and high-level business mentor. After serving in the medical field for 17 years, she realized two hard truths. One, her heart was to be home with her kiddos. Two, she had lost the feeling that she was doing meaningful work in the lives of others. Jessica was looking for a solution that would allow her to be a mom first and to put her work second. She also knew that she had greatness inside of her to serve others in a really powerful way. Jessica invested $30,000 in 3 years into learning how to create and operate a coaching business. In retrospect, that was the long, expensive way. The lessons she learned and the challenges she has overcome have allowed her to mentor others in creating a sustainable coaching businesses. Welcome to the podcast, Jessica.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm so grateful to be here.
Yes, and where are you calling in from?
I am calling in from Florida, which is super new for our family. 1 month ago, we moved 7,000 miles in a car, drove all the way across the country to be here. So I'm excited to say I'm coming in from Florida.
Amazing. And I don't know, I'm sure the weather's nicer there, but Georgia, the weather's been in the freezings levels this week. So we'd all love to be in Florida, that's for sure.
It was beautiful, like 70 degrees. I was in shorts yesterday. It was lovely.
This sounds really wonderful. So just so people can get to know you, tell us your story, how you started out, how you got to be doing what you're doing now.
Yeah, so really for me, it started probably about 15 years ago. I was doing the adulting thing, right? I had checked all the boxes that society said you needed to check to be successful. I had a career as a nurse, I had the marriage, I had the two kids, I had the dogs, I had the custom built house. From the outside looking in, you would think, dang, this girl's got it all, right? Like I did what society said you needed to do to be successful. But the truth was I was wearing a mask and looking like everything was fine to keep up the storyline, but inside I was really suffering. We were living paycheck to paycheck, sometimes buying gas and groceries on credit cards. I was overwhelmed as a mom. I was checked out as a wife. I was not enjoying my career. And I had this huge, beautiful house that like I could barely keep clean because it was so big. And so it was one of those moments where, I just distinctly remember a day where I looked myself in the mirror and I just cried because I didn't even recognize the girl looking back at me. I was 65 pounds overweight. I was eating just to feel good, and I didn't even know where to start. And I remember thinking, gosh, adulting is such a letdown. Like I had these big dreams and I had these ideas of how awesome it would be. And yes, I expected that there would be challenge, but I never expected to get to this place where I checked off the entire list and I'm miserable. And that was a tough, tough moment for me. And I had called my dad and I was sharing with my dad what was going on, finally being willing to be honest about my situation. And I grew up in a small town called Portola. So shout out to Portola, California, and Tim Road and the One Life Fully Lived organization, because they hosted their first annual One Life Fully Lived. And I thought, yeah, I'd really like to live my life fully. And I can tell you right now, it's not happening. And so my dad actually sponsored the $39 ticket cost. And we went to the event and I was awakened. I was awakened to doing finances differently. I was awakened to the fact that I had been checking off society's checklist and I had never been taught how to create my own checklist. And that's probably why I was so frustrated because it wasn't necessarily authentic to what my heart wanted to create. And I think there's always that moment. There's two moments kind of for everybody, and these moments might come more than one time in a lifetime. And those are those moments when you look in the mirror and you don't recognize the person standing back at you and you think, not this. I'm not sure what, but not this. Mm-hmm. And then the second comes when you have an awakening. Maybe you hear something, a friend shares something with you, you hear a podcast, you get invited to a personal growth event like One Life Fully Lived, and you become awakened to what you didn't know that you didn't know. And that set me on a path to really figure out my financial situation. So we did the hard thing and we took the hit on our credit and we short sold our huge house and we moved into a rental property, and we really took several years just working hard, getting our finances taken care of. Dave Ramsey's Total Money Makeover was our inspiration in that moment. And then from there, I just kept awakening and awakening and awakening. Like, okay, now that I did this, what's next? Where do I go? Who do I learn from? What does my soul want? What inspires me? And checking off society's checklist did not inspire me, but I just felt so inspired to help people in a deeper way. At that time, I was working as a registered nurse in my community. I was in the emergency room. And what I knew about that job is that I loved the adrenaline and the excitement of like a good emergency, right? Like in the ER shows, like the excitement of the like craziness of a trauma or a heart attack. I really, really enjoyed like acute emergency medicine. But inside, I was so frustrated because those acute cases are like, maybe once a week. But the rest of it is people in life making poor choices, addicted to drugs and alcohol, having ineffective relationships, ineffective coping, poor nutrition, poor lifestyle, leading to stress and diabetes and high blood pressure. And I think we all know that it's better to eat a salad than it is to eat a cheeseburger and fries. I think we all know that it's healthier to cook whole foods at home than it is to hit the drive-through. But most people face challenges and they're busy, and they were like me. They didn't know how to cope with the big emotions. And so food became that comfort. And having been from that place and walked through that discomfort and learned how to process my emotions, my heart was breaking because I knew that there was so much more out there that these people just didn't know that they didn't know. And they didn't have to stay stuck if they didn't want to. And in the ER, I could tell that they wanted to change, but I could also tell that they had lost hope that it was possible. And I wanted to do something more. Fast forward a little bit, the father of my children and I did end up getting a divorce because we just realized that relationship was not serving either of us. And I'm grateful to say that today we are very kind to one another. We do a great job co-parenting. He was a huge support in this move to Florida, and we do still have split custody. And I'm just so grateful that relationship it really has blossomed from what it was. We care a lot about our children, and we have that common united front. And I decided I wanted to start a coaching business. Helping people at a deeper level is what inspired me. And I got another opportunity to join Entrepreneur Simplified and their business coaching. And so my dad and I got in a car and we drove to Utah, and we did it together because my dad owned his own business at that time, and he wanted to learn more and scale more. And so I spent 3 years and $30,000 learning about how to create a coaching business because I knew how to connect with people. I'm a nurse. Like, I can talk people out of their clothes in like 5 seconds and have a needle in their arm. But it was the business piece. Like, how do I scale a business that creates profit? And what drove that desire was, number one, I wanted to help people in a different way. Number two, I was starting to feel pretty disillusioned with healthcare because I didn't feel like it was really truly creating solutions for people. It's just putting on a Band-Aid and sending them out the door in the environment that I worked in. And number three, since I was now single parenting, I really, really felt like I was missing out on time with my kids, because the choice to divorce also meant the choice to only spend 50% of the time with my children. And some of that time I had to go to work. And I didn't want that to be my story. My heart was home with my babies, and my heart was helping people on a deeper level. So for me, creating a coaching business was the solution. Um, and then after 3 years, I reached another point where I had to look in the mirror and be like, this is not working. $30,000 investment. I did everything they told me to do, and I had an expensive hobby. It was costing more money to operate than it was serving people. And that was another moment that was really hard. Like, I know what I'm being called to do. I know what my desire is. I'm awake to it. I've put in the work. I've put in the money. Like, why isn't this working for me? And that's when I learned that there are systems, right? I had been creating systems from the ground up, but what I was really looking for was not the kit that taught me how to put the car together. I wanted the keys to the Ferrari, and I wanted to push the gas. That was the difference between the $30,000, here's all the car parts in the manual, versus the physician-led system that I'm partnered with now. So I chose to partner with Dr. Wayne Scott Anderson and his Habits of Health system, because it had everything that I was trying to do for people, but it had a 20-year track record of actually being successful. So I shifted again. And, that shift came with a dose of reality. It came with that hard look in the mirror, with that, I have to say, this isn't working. I have to be humble enough to admit that what I'm doing is not working the way that I'm wanting it to work. And it also comes with the willingness to be open and coachable to things that you didn't know you didn't know. And it also took the willingness to know that it's not what I know, but it's what I know that just isn't so, that might be messing me up. So it takes a little bit of humility. I would say, if anything, in these shifts, it takes a good dose of an honest look at current reality. I had to stop lying to myself about the fact, right, air quotes, that things were going well. And I had to be humble enough to be open to forgetting what I thought I knew, and to be coachable to a new way. And so with that shift, I was able to help enough people to set myself free from nursing. And I completely retired from nursing. What that took was really to replace my income, because being a single mama, I had to cover the mortgage and pay all the bills and, do all the adulting things on my own paycheck. And gosh, I just will never forget the day that I put in my 2 weeks notice. And I do have to say, disclaimer, like, it takes hard work. You have to actually do the thing to replace the income. It's not easy peasy, but I do remember that day that I put in my 2 weeks notice. And I remember anticipating, like, how is this going to feel like on my last day of work? And I felt so torn. Like, half of me was like, this place that I worked at raised me. Like, they took me under their wing from a brand new certified nurse's assistant all the way through nursing school. They grew me as a nurse. They loved me. They cared about me. And after 17 years, I'm making a shift, and it doesn't include them in my future. So there was part of me that was sad. It was almost like a teenager leaving home. There was another part of me that felt immensely free. Like, I just felt like finally I was free to really go and create my life. Because when I dreamed about what I wanted from my life, setting an alarm to go to work for somebody else was not on that checklist. So I just kept asking, how can I? How can I? How can I? And it takes time. It takes patience. It takes consistency. It takes time. It takes willingness to shift and to pivot and to make changes. And then the last pivot. So at this point, this is December of 2022. I have been coaching full time. I put my nursing license in inactive status, which was another bold pivot. And then most recently, I did remarry. My husband and I have been together for 4 years. So he came into my life right about the time that I was making the shift from coaching to nursing, or from nursing to coaching. And as a family, I was born and raised on a ranch. Like, I was literally born by a midwife on the ranch in Sierra Valley, California, and I'm named after my mama's horse. Jessica Gale was the horse that existed before I was born. And so from those roots, I didn't move very far away from my hometown. I moved about 50 miles, and that's where I stayed. And my husband is actually from Brazil, and he had seen more of the United States than I had. And it got me thinking, what kind of experiences in this life am I missing because I'm staying so close to my roots? Like, what else could there be, right? Like, he got me a little bit more curious about what's out there. Of course, I loved traveling. I loved going different places and coming home. But I had never considered living anywhere else. That was not on my radar. It was not on my checklist. It was another milestone in life that I became awake to and curious about, and started asking, how can I? And so 2 years, this move was 2 years in the making, because it is complicated when you have a father who's very engaged with his children and loves his children dearly, and a mom wanting to move 3,000 miles away. There's a few details there in the middle that have to make that possible. And so it took us about a good 2 years to really work on a solid plan that felt good to us, that was safe for our kids, that allowed us to expand our little family. And I said about 4 weeks ago, we packed all of our things into a 6x12 cargo trailer. Whatever didn't fit didn't go. We sold a lot. We took a lot of things to the dump. We took a lot of things to donation. And, another component of that pivoting is being willing to let go. Being willing to let go of the things that are no longer serving where you're going. And a couch that I had had for 20 years that I really loved because it was so comfortable wasn't necessarily serving my move. It was either the couch or all the boxes of clothes, because we limited ourselves to 6x12 hell or high water, right? we hooked that up to the Tahoe, and it took 7 days to drive across the country to move into our new home. So there are a lot of pivots, a lot of awakenings, a lot of moments where you say, I'm just not sure that this is working anymore. I'm awake to expanding. I'm not sure how, but I'm willing to ask. I'm willing to find mentorship. I'm willing to keep going. And here we are.
Beautiful. And thanks for sharing your story. And I like your question, how can I? How can I? If we just ask ourselves that, it opens up so many possibilities.
It really does. It really does. We get stuck in the rut of I can't because, and sometimes I can't because is followed by something that's very legitimate. I can't because I don't make enough money. How can I make enough money to make that possible? Right? When we make that one pivot, so many possibilities awaken.
Exactly. So I wanted to ask about something early on. There's many girls and women who are growing up without their father in their life. And, there's statistics about, how that affects them in life. And it really does have huge effects. But you've been talking in your story about a very close relationship with your dad. Tell me about that. How was your relationship with your dad growing up, and how did you develop such a beautiful relationship?
This is a crazy question because I actually grew up without my dad, and it might make me cry a little bit. Growing up, I was always a daddy's girl. My dad and I were best friends. He owned an automotive shop, and I loved going down to the shop and helping dad. I would get on the little creeper that goes into the car with the wheels, and I would hand dad tools. And I loved being with my dad. And my parents got divorced, and he literally lived in a house that I could see from my house. And for a while, we did the back and forth between parents. And then things got really, really messy, like to the point where sometimes our exchanges between parents were law enforcement supervised because things got really messy. And then my mom remarried, and my dad ended up letting my stepdad legally adopt us. So there was a period of my life from, probably 10 or 11, probably 10 years old until I was 17 that I could see my dad's house from where I lived. My heart was broken because I couldn't see my dad. There were a lot of things that I didn't understand, like why did he let this other man adopt us? And it was a very confusing time. So I definitely relate to being that girl that grew up without her dad. Granted, I did have fatherly influence from my stepdad, but he worked out of town a lot. And I did not have a good relationship with him because I wanted my dad and he wasn't my dad. And my dad ended up remarrying, and his wife had kids. So I felt like, well, he's got a new family now. He doesn't need me. There was a lot of questions, a lot of feelings, a lot of challenges with self-worth. And that honestly is when I learned how to eat my feelings, how to eat food to make myself feel better. And then when I was about 17, my mom and my stepdad were divorcing. And I was like, quite frankly, I'm sick of wondering. I'm sick of these stories going through my head telling me that I wasn't good enough and my dad abandoned me. And at that point, I had a little bit more maturity to say, what if my stories aren't true? What if the things that I've been believing up to this point aren't true? So I picked up the phone and I called my dad and I said, hey, I've got questions. And I tore down the driveway in my little Toyota pickup, and I met my dad, and we hugged and we cried and we talked for like 24 hours. And we just shared all the things that had happened, and it was really healing for both of us. And my dad and I are best friends today. And it definitely does. It does affect a young girl when they're being raised without the influence of their father, and they're questioning their self-worth. And what I would say to that is that I am a firm believer that every single thing in your life has happened to serve you. And another powerful question to ask is, if I believe that what I'm going through right now is serving me to become the person that I know I was designed to be, then how is it serving me? And it pulls you out of that story that you create about being a victim. And it allows you to be open to the possibility of the fact that this is going to bring me greatness. If I had never gone through that struggle, had never learned how to eat my feelings, had never learned how to overcome emotional eating, I would not be the perfect coach to support people that are eating to numb the pain of their life.
Beautiful. So let's talk about stories. We tell ourselves some horrible stories sometimes. Sometimes we lie to ourselves and make things seem better than they really are so we can cope. The bad stories are worse. The good stories, pretending with the mask. Oh, I'm okay. Look at me, all the boxes are checked. So let's just talk about stories. When you're working with people, how do you deal with that?
That's such a powerful question. Most of the time when people come to me, we start with having a conversation about their current reality. And I always say that current reality is a required taste, because it does require you to remove that mask. And if you truly want to move forward in your life, it requires a little bit of vulnerability, right? Like when I take the mask off, these are the places inside that I don't show people. These are the places that I pretend are okay. These are the places that in the dark at night I cry about. And the very first step in any sort of transformation, shift, pivot, change is to be willing to admit to the places inside that hurt and to put a flashlight right on those places and to allow those tears, allow that pain. And oftentimes we talk about the fact of what happened versus the story recreated, right? So the fact was my parents got divorced. My dad moved out. My stepdad adopted me. Those are the facts that I could take to a court of law to make a case. Mm-hmm. The stories that I told myself was that my dad didn't love me anymore, that I wasn't worth him sticking around for, that I wasn't worthy of being loved. Those are the stories. And you can see there's still some emotion there because those stories hurt. Those stories are what caused the deep, dark places. Those were the stories that forced the mask, right? As a teenage girl, my mom was going through a lot. She was working as a log truck driver. So she worked long hours and she was exhausted. And she, her own self, was figuring out her own emotions. And I didn't feel like there was a whole lot of space for that. But as an adult, being willing to say, okay, the facts were my dad left, my stepdad adopted me, my parents were divorced, is not the same as the story of all of a sudden I'm unworthy. Because my dad and I are best friends now, and never, never, never did he ever think that I wasn't worthy, that there wasn't a day that went by that he didn't miss me and question his decision. So those are the pieces where you have to be really, really willing to take a look and think about the fact, what would hold up in a court of law, and the story. What's the story I made up about it? Another really simple one is when women step on the scale. The scale is a number. There is no story that goes with that number. It is simply data. But sometimes the stories we tell ourselves are, I'm fat, I'm unworthy, I'm unlovable, I'm disgusting. Look at this number on the scale. Or the opposite can happen. Oh, look at this number on the scale. I'm beautiful, I'm awesome, I'm worthy, right? We give the scale too much power because of the stories that we create about the facts.
Exactly. And, there's a lot of people of every age that for some reason feel unworthy, whatever stories they're telling themselves. So, gosh, at 17, you were pretty wise and pretty brave to get in your truck and make that appointment with your dad. So what does it take for most people to get to that point where they'll actually make that appointment, whether it be with another person, with themselves, to actually sit down and look at those stories and have the courage to look at them? What does it take?
Mm-hmm. Human beings are designed to move away from pain. We are not designed to move towards pleasure. We will move away from pain way more often than we will move towards pleasure. And I would say 98% of the time, the pain is so immense that we are just not willing to sit in it anymore. And being brave, getting in that truck, making that appointment, picking up the phone, reaching out in Messenger, that takes courage. It's uncomfortable, right? But the discomfort of taking action is less than the discomfort of sitting in pain. So most of the time, the pain just gets to a point where you're not willing to endure it anymore. There's that like freaky 2% that's like, I'm not in pain, I'm super inspired, I'm ready to do something different, like let's go. But that's very unusual. For most people, big life change and things that are uncomfortable are just, they're prompted by an immense amount of pain that causes them to move. I will also say the caveat to that is that at some point as you're making change, when the pain starts going away, so does your motivation. And then enter the yo-yo, right? This is the cycle where you make a change and you get a little bit better and the pain goes away and you go right back to the pain. And then you make a change and it gets a little better and then you go right back to the pain. So that's a whole nother podcast, I'm sure. But there's something to give you a word of warning about that pain problem solving cycle.
Mm-hmm. So let's say that you've decided that this is enough is enough. You want to find a coach or a counselor or somebody to help you through this, but of course you're scared and it's embarrassing to share some of these things. How would you tell someone to go about finding that person? Let's say, some people have that close friend, but a lot of people, even with their close friends, they don't want to be that vulnerable with those kind of things.
That's true. It's easier to talk to a stranger about those vulnerable pieces. What I will say is that with the invention of social media, I'm willing to bet if you put it out there, right? This is a little woo-woo piece, is if you put it out there and you're ready to make a change, there's going to be a Facebook ad that pops up. You're going to start doing Google searches. You've probably seen testimonials on somebody else's Facebook page, maybe a friend of a friend. Like I have had complete strangers say, "Hey, I saw this post of yours on Facebook and what you had to say really spoke to me and I'm struggling a little bit. Would you be willing to talk to me?" Right? And it can be scary, but I am a firm believer that if you start searching and you put it out there that you're ready and willing to make a change, it's like they say, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. So just trust that what you're looking for is out there, but be brave enough to start looking. And there's a high probability that you've probably seen something somewhere along your journey that sparked your interest before you decided that you were ready. And you're probably like, where did I see that ad, that person, that post? Where was that? I resonated with that. So I would say just be brave enough to put it out there and start asking questions like, hey, does anybody know anybody? There's a chance that you've got somebody in your social circle that is taking steps and might be able to connect you through referral, but really just be open and start looking and let the universe do the magic of what the universe does every single time. The one life fully lived, it came when I had decided not this. Mm-hmm. I didn't know what. I was talking to my dad, not this, mm-hmm. right? The $30,000 opportunity came when I decided not this. I don't know what. I think it's coaching, but not this. Mm-hmm. The partnership with Dr. Anderson and his Habits of Health system came when I said not this. Mm-hmm. I'm open to something new, not this. The opportunity to Florida came when I said, I wonder what's possible, right? So just believe that what you want is possible and start asking questions. And really, somebody told me, Dr. Alok Trivedi, I did some coaching with him as well. He said, the quality of your life is directly related to the quality of the questions that you ask. Mm-hmm. So start asking quality questions.
Beautiful. So tell us about you. If people actually resonate with you today and what you're saying, how would they work with you? What websites or how do they contact you?
Yeah, great question. So you can find me on Facebook, Jessica Smith Dos Santos on Facebook. I'm also just going to throw my phone number out here. It's 775-830-4447. Shoot me a text. I respond better by text. I don't usually answer numbers that I don't know. So send me a text. Tell me that it resonated. You would love to chat. I would love to connect with you. And just a little plug for all the nurses out there. I'm in the process of writing a book called Shit They Don't Tell You in Nursing School that talks about all of the pivots and the stories through a 17-year career. So keep your eyeballs open for that coming soon. Mm-hmm. I'm hoping like March of 2023.
Beautiful.
As you know, as an author, it's a labor of love, huh?
Mm-hmm. It really is. It really is. So just a personal question. What gives you the most happiness in your life at this point?
Oh my gosh. I love being present and making memories with my family. Like nothing brings me more joy than to be with my family, fully present, making memories. I mean, that 7,000 mile trip was 7,000 7 days, 3,000 miles, was nothing but memories.
Hmm.
And that brings my heart the most joy, which is why, since I know that about myself, like being a mom is one of my highest values, coaching is one of my highest values, and learning. So anything where I'm doing those three things, I get the most joy. And my encouragement for others would be to know yourself, know what truly brings you the most joy, and be willing to be like, hey, learning brings me joy. I'm going to go find out how to learn something new, read a new book every single day because it brings me joy. And what brings me joy is going to be different than what brings other people joy. And that's the secret sauce, is knowing what sets your heart on fire and setting up your life intentionally so that you get to do a whole lot more of that.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast today and your wisdom and that little bit you just told us about how to live an incredible life.
My pleasure. Thank you for hosting this. I mean, people deserve to live an abundant, incredible, beautiful, wonderful life. We have one of them. So, what are you going to do with it?
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Jessica, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Sounds great.